Hi, this is Randy, also known as Star Thinker. I'm doing another knee-jerk reaction video review, and it's funny because this is like the my second one today. I'm trying to get this centered a little bit. Anyway, I just did a review for another movie, and I had some time to kill, so I thought I'd watch Artemis Fowl. And I am coming into this with a bias. I am going to warn you that there's going to be multiple spoilers because normally if I'll say spoilers and I'll talk about the movie and I'll try not to release any main plot points or anything. But this movie just, I have to talk about it. I just do. So, like I said, I'm going into this with a bias. I work nights and I work with computers, and a lot of times I'm just sitting there and I'll have 5 or 6 computers around me and I'm installing stuff and I just have to click next and okay and restart this one. So while I'm doing that, I'll have something up on the screen. Usually it's YouTube, and I just watch YouTube videos all night long. And I was watching, sometimes I get caught in like a series of YouTube videos, or someone I think, I might have found someone I thought they were funny, so I'd watch a couple of their videos. And I watched this video where this guy talked about Artemis Fowl. And of course that brought up other videos that talked about Artemis Fowl. And I watched a review for the movie because I saw this before and I thought, well, I might watch this at some point. I've never read the books. I just want to be clear about that because that is an important point later on. But this guy reviewing this movie had said that this was one of the worst movies he'd ever seen, and it was worse than Cats. Now, I've tried to watch Cats. I've never made it all the way through Cats because it's just awful. And I know, like, I don't normally go to Rotten Tomatoes like at all, but I know Cats is like really low. And I found out that Artemis Fowl is like one of the lowest rated movies on Rotten Tomatoes, or pretty low on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know how they rank their movies, but every review. Of course, when that review came up, then a whole bunch of other reviews came up. I watched about 10 or 11 reviews, and some of these reviews are short, 5-10 minutes. Some of them were like 20-25 minute long, just going into how awful this movie was, and nobody said a good thing about any of it. And so, I mean, the more reviews I watched, the more I was curious. I'm like, can I find a good review of this movie? And absolutely no one did. So I heard a lot of the criticisms. I guess if you've read the books, you're going to, it's not just a matter of it's a bad movie, but you're going to hate this movie. That's what I got from some of the reviewers that had read the books and then watched the movies. I watched one reviewer who started his review, he kind of paused it, and he came back on and says, I just read the first book and now I can see what everyone's talking about. And he finished his review based on the fact that he just read the book, which is a kind of a really interesting thing to do. And I think that was clever. But yeah, nobody said anything good about this movie. So naturally, I wanted to watch it more. I did make it all the way through the movie. There's just so many things. And again, some of these things are pointed out in the preview, in the reviews I wrote, so I kind of spotted them. But other things, you don't even have to be told about them to be like, what the hell? Why is that? Why is it? Who is that? So one thing, some people said the story was so confusing, but I didn't find the story that confusing. Well, I guess I did, because some of it just doesn't make sense. So, the premise is there's a fairy world that's way underground. They're really advanced, and they show their advanced. They don't show recreation. They don't show home life. They just show people at work. And of course, it's very militaristic. It's very military-like. And everything is steel. And I don't think I saw anything that wasn't steel. And you're like, if you put a coat of paint on that, it won't be so bad. But no, everything was just gray steel. And apparently that's the lifestyle they've chosen for themselves. I can imagine you can make a better life underground than this. And it's all lava and rocks and everything. But it's every race you could think of offhand. I could think of a lot of races that weren't there, but like there was a centaur, goblins, an ogre, elves and dwarves, who knows what else, all the fairy folk. And they explain, this is one thing that doesn't make sense, is the story starts with this giant dwarf who's human size, but he looks like a dwarf, who's captured by the British intelligence agency, and he's being interviewed in a safe spot offshore. And they make a big deal out of this. They make a big deal about, I can't remember if they said MI5 or MI6, but he's being interviewed by the British intelligence agency in this really secure spot, and he's all chained up, and they're in the middle of the ocean on an old derelict oil rig or something. And they never explain that again. About halfway through the movie, because the first part of the movie is him narrating what happened, and then by the time the movie ends and everything, they never revisit this. They never, as far as we know, this guy was never captured by MI5. This guy was never picked up. He's still part of the story. So why was he captured and being interviewed by British intelligence? They never explain that. And he stops the expedition. Yeah, I can't remember the last time they mentioned it, but it goes to the end of the movie and they never explain how he got caught or why he got caught, or does this mean humans know about fairy folk now? I don't think they actually believed he was a dwarf, because he's so big. But that's one of the things that I don't remember any of the reviewers talking about, that I was like, well, why did they never explain why he was being interviewed by the intelligence agency? They never do. And there's lots of things that are like that. They establish, they talk about a breach, and oh my God, there's a breach. And so someone's got to go up and maintain. So apparently when a fairy folk gets to the surface without authorization, it's a breach. And they never explain, it's a big ogre, like a big 12 foot tall ogre, maybe 20 foot tall. It's a giant. And never explain how that thing got to the future. But they make this big deal about sending the police elf to the future, or to the police elf to the surface. They make a big deal of it. They're like, oh, here's a pod. This pod's got to ride up this column of lava. And the guy's explaining it, and he's, it's going to travel at 600 miles an hour, and you're going to be amazed. And he's just all excited about, he gets to use this thing. But then, like, right after that elf gets to the surface, like 20 other elves follow. And they don't explain, did they have to go through this same thing? Did they have to make such a big deal about their exit and about how they got to the surface? No, they just all of a sudden arrived. And later on, a whole army of elves get to the surface. So how did they get there? Did they have to ride a column of lava at 600 miles an hour and have this all explained by a centaur, and it's a big deal? Because it didn't seem like a big deal. It seems like these surface excursions happen all the time. They have a squad of elves that deal with surface excursions. So why wouldn't they happen all the time? So anyway, that's one of the things that did not make sense. And like every scene has something like this. So then they have a time freeze. This ogre thing attacks a wedding party, apparently in Italy. And they put a time freeze over it. That's what they call it. And everything froze except for the elves. So the elves can move about at will, but like they had people with their drinks, and the water spilling out, but that's frozen, and things in midair frozen, and a piece of cake frozen in the air. So time froze, and even the ogre froze. And then later on, they'd put time freeze over the mansion, and it literally has no effect of anything in the mansion. Nothing in the mansion freezes. So you're like, why did a time freeze everything over here? But it didn't seem to, literally, what purpose did it serve over here? It didn't freeze anything. They were free to move about. They were free to do whatever they wanted. Nothing froze. This is when they take that same ogre and they have attacked the house, and because of plot devices, and nothing is frozen inside the house. The ogre froze in the first time freeze, but didn't freeze in this time. And like I said, things are being smashed, things are flying about. Nothing. Why? What purpose did this time freeze serve? Other than then it collapses, and then they don't explain, is this a common thing? Is this something that only happened this one time? But this time freeze is collapsing, and it's putting out all these bubbles, and apparently it's killing people. But then they show that people getting caught in it survive, and I don't know. It just didn't make sense, and nothing was explained. And then like they bring in, of course, because the main character is a little kid. To me, it was like watching Richie Rich. It's just like it made no sense. This kid comes out in the first 5 minutes as a total ass, and you hated him. And you're like, why would I be rooting for this? And apparently, that's the way he is in the book. But in the book, he's a bad guy throughout the whole first book. And I guess there's a redemption arc if you read the 100 other books. But in this book, all he knows is that his father disappeared. And apparently his father already completed the mission because they've already established that this thing they were looking for, which is the source of all the magic for all the elves, was in his safe. So if he already had that, why is he still going out on these secret missions with no explanation? And they've established that he's stolen things like the Rosetta Stone. And that was to protect, and apparently he's doing this for good because he's protecting the existence of fairy folk, which doesn't make sense because then he's also talking about how he's not sure he believes in the fairy folk, but he's got their source of magic somehow. I don't know. At some point you're just like, oh, just screw it, like I guess this is just something that happens. But if he's already got their source of magic, why is he going on missions still? And apparently he was given this by an elf that he met at a tree, and it's not clear. I mean, in the guy's journal, he said he saw a fairy by this tree, so they stake out this tree hoping another fairy will come along. But they, just because this guy saw a fairy at this tree once, it doesn't explain why they think another one's going to come right away. They could have staked out that tree for 100 years and not seen anything. But no, it just so happened that this fairy showed up at the tree because she's trying to clear her father, who stole this item and gave it to this human, establishing that there's communication between fairies and humans. But yet the guy is like, there hasn't been. I don't know. She finds a coin with a name on it. Again, it's never mentioned again what the significance of this is, but she seemed like it was very significant. She picks it up and there's music playing and everything, but they never revisit that. She gets shot with a tranquilizer dart, and so these people have captured their first fairy, which is an elf with wings, I guess. Yeah. And oh boy, what else? Like I said, some of the stuff I learned from the review, like the butler, who you're not supposed to call butler, but that's his name. His name is Butler, and he's a butler, but you can't call him Butler. Yeah, and he's apparently like the greatest fighter in the world, and they never once showed him fight. And when the ogre attacks the house, he tries to push a couch into him. He tries to stab him. He's got this big bull statue that he's using the horns to try to stab the thing with, and I'm like, he's just pushing this couch into the sand. Like, why don't they show him with these fights and do these moves and stuff? And they also saw him training was it his niece or his daughter? Another girl who just, because if you have a kid main character, you got to have another kid be a sidekick. And so, I guess they introduced this girl to do that. I don't know if she plays a bigger role in the book or what, but again, they showed her training with this guy, being just as good of a fighter as he is, but all she did in the movie was scream and hang from stuff and scream some more. So they didn't really show her do anything. Likewise, this kid never did anything except survive instances. He didn't solve anything, or it's just really bizarre. But he's supposed to be a super genius. And I like how you can predict things, like they try to show him as an asshole, and then his teacher sits down. And of course, as soon as his teacher spends 5 minutes of the movie time explaining how expensive his chair is, you're just like, okay, this kid is going to point out that it's a fake. And naturally, he points out that it's a fake. It's just like, yeah, that was so predictable. And there were other things that were just so predictable, like, as soon as they established this thing was missing, and they established this guy has a fancy safe in his house, you're like, okay, the thing that's missing is going to be in the safe. I don't know. A lot of it didn't make sense. I don't know if I'd call it the worst movie in the world, but it just didn't make sense at all. So there were some other things like, okay, so they have this squadron of elves they're supposed to go up and contain when a fairy folk breaches the surface. And they have things like time freezes, and they have these fancy guns that shoot rays, pulses, and they have these glasses that are x-ray glasses, and you can see through walls, and they have all this technology, but they can't enter your house unless they're invited. I'm like, that is so stupid. They have all this stuff, and their whole job is to contain stuff, and yet the whole army surrounds this house, and the only, the most magical, important item to all the fairy folk are in this house, and they got to have it back or their civilization will die, and yet the army can't go in and get it because they weren't invited into the house. And I'm like, who comes up with this stuff? And the books, like I said, I haven't read the books. The books might be better, but this movie just felt like it was written by a 5-year-old trying to spell out fantasy sequences. But the biggest WTF moment comes, because like this kid, okay, they establish he's an asshole, but when all this stuff goes down, he's not really an asshole. He's friendly to his butler. He's friendly to his butler's daughter. He's friendly to the elf, and he's like, we got to be friends. We got to be allies. And he's so the whole asshole thing, I don't know what that was about. Now he's just a regular kid, because all he does is survive stuff. He survives the troll attack. He survives. I guess that was the only thing in the movie that happened. Now, I guess when the time thing collapsed. So that's it. And at the end of the movie, he's like, I am Artemis Fowl. And he goes, I'm a master criminal. And my mind was just blown away by that. I'm like, when did he even break a rule or statute, let alone break laws to become a criminal? But now he's declaring himself a master criminal, and he never did anything in the movie except survive falling from a chandelier. And I don't know. It was the dwarf that found the item and opened the safe, the Optimus Prime thing, and it was the elf that saved the guy's life. He never did anything, and now he's declaring, I'm a master criminal. And I'm like, whoa, what did I miss in this whole movie? What did he do? And now that they've established that this thing is safe, why do they got to keep going on these missions? What do the missions accomplish? They never explain any of this. It's just, I would not. I watched it hoping there'd be some cool special effects. They were run of the mill. The characters, I love fantasy. You can see up here, like, I love fantasy items and stuff. If you go a little bit higher, you can see there's Pilgrims and Marvin. I love this genre, but nothing about it stood out. The goblins look like any goblins you've seen in any movie before. The dwarves look like any dwarves you've seen in any movie before. They never explained why this dwarf was being interviewed in the first place. They never explained why he was going on these missions. They never explain, and I guess this is all opened up for sequel stuff, but if this is the worst movie ever made, I can't imagine they're going to make a sequel out of it. They never utilized some of the characters that they built up in the first fight. The first 5 minutes, they're like, oh, this is the greatest fighter in the world, and this is the smartest kid in the world, and this fighter's daughter is the greatest daughter in the world. But none of them did anything in the movie. They simply didn't, and I don't understand. They built all these characters up and then didn't use any of that. And I guess, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if I'd call it the worst movie ever made, but it's got to be right up there with, none of it made sense. It could have been a lot greater. They could have showed him use his brains to do something, and I don't think they ever did, except for establish that his teacher's chair was a fake. They did say things at the beginning, like, oh, he won an architectural contest to design an opera house at the age of 10, but they never showed that. They never established that. And then what was the other thing they said he did? He did something by the age of 7 and then something by the age of 10. But all I did was show him like surfing and doing Richie Rich stuff. You know, like I said, it reminded me of Richie Rich meets a dwarf. You know, that's basically the movie. um, One nitpick that I didn't see this mentioned by any of the reviewers I saw, but the house is like a family. What do you call it? Not an heirloom, but it's been in the family for generations, and it's established that it's a lighthouse. And they show an aerial view of it, and they have this big peninsula. So I'm picturing a big peninsula, and the house was like down here on the side. So like if that's a lighthouse, any ship approaching from the end is going to hit the point of the peninsula before it sees. You know, the whole point of the lighthouse is to say, hey, there's a peninsula here, but the lighthouse is way back on the peninsula. I'm just, the first time I saw it, I'm like, why didn't anyone mention this part? You know, this lighthouse is totally worthless as a lighthouse. It's not near the point. Ships are going to hit that point, and I don't know. Nothing in this movie was thought out, or you know, they were like, okay, let's establish him as a genius, but then he doesn't do anything in the whole movie except trust me, and then trust him for what? I think that was just an excuse to get the elf out of the cage. And then the troll attacks. They don't even use their skills to kill the not the troll, the ogre, whatever that thing was. They don't even use their skills to defeat it. It defeats itself by falling off a chandelier and landing on its head. None of them did anything to kill the troll. I know it's a Disney movie and you don't want your characters killing things, but all right, so they didn't use their skills there. And then the time thing collapses, they didn't use their skills there. And they used the magic item to rescue their father. They just wished him back to the house and he's there. So they didn't use their skills there. It was the magic item that did that. And then they showed that it was returned, and he declares himself a master criminal based on the fact that he survived a troll attacking his house. Goblin. No, not a goblin. Troll? Ogre. I don't know. It was just a big, ugly creature that had no brains and just wanted to eat people. And you know, they set it up for sequels, but I mean, if this got such bad reviews, of course, there was probably going to be a sequel. But I don't think they finished all the Narnia books because, like, those got bad reviews, and there were some other things that they started that they never finished because of the bad reviews. So I don't know if they'll do anything with this one. But yeah, worst movie ever made? I don't know. But it's got to be close because nothing in here made sense. Even if you're a little kid watching this, a lot of the gags and stuff were for little kids. I mean, the dwarf eats dirt and poops it out his butt. What's okay? But later on, he swallows the Optimus Prime, and it just sits in his belly. It doesn't come right out right away. I don't know. It's not a good movie. Even the special effects, like I was saying, the elves look like any other elves from any other movie you've ever seen. The creatures look like any creatures from any other movie you've ever seen. Even the advanced tech of the fairy folk, because they're fairy folk, but they're more advanced than humans. They're like space aliens. I didn't see anything there. You know, none of the special effects were really outstanding. The story wasn't outstanding. So yeah, I'm not giving this a good review. And I'm trying to think. In my last review, I wanted to say something bad about the movie, and I couldn't think of anything bad. So now I'm thinking, what can I say that's good about this movie? I'm like, there's no redeeming characters. The characters never lived up to their names. What can I say good about this movie? They never resolved. There was so many things that were like, oh, this is really important, but then they never mention it again in the rest of the whole movie. Even the concept of a giant dwarf isn't original. I mean, that was in Marvel movies. The concept of the guy being frozen in crystal. I recently saw that in an old episode of Deep Space Nine where Kira was trapped in crystal and it was growing around her. They never explained who the villain was or or why he was, or you just knew that he wanted to get this item so he could wipe out mankind. And poor Judi Dench. I used to watch As Time Goes By. If you've never seen that, it's an old British show. I watched it because at the time I was madly in love with her daughter in the show, and so I watched it. I've seen every episode. And Judi Dench plays a woman. She's a widow, and she's just retiring, and she just found out that the letter she sent to her lover in World War II never arrived, and that's why he never came back to her, because he thought they broke up. And they realize this is a mistake, and it's dealing with two people at their retirement age realizing they're still in love with each other and getting back together, which it's a sweet concept. And I love the old British shows anyway, but to see her, that's how I remember Judi Dench. And now she's Dame Judi Dench, and she's playing this role where you don't know if she's evil or good. At the end, it seems like she's good, and right in the middle, there's a point where, like, she tells one of her lieutenants to do something, and he breaks the rules to do it, and she's like, well, that's why I made you a lieutenant. And you're like, okay, maybe she is good, but at the beginning, like, you swear, like, oh, she's the evil, she's going to be the bad guy, but no, it's just that's the way she is. There's no explanation for it. They get the item back and they steal it in the vault, and they said, yep, it's back where it's supposed to be. And I'm like, well, if this thing is sealed in a vault and they never use it, what's the point of it? And this was just seemed like a dumb origin story for sequels, and I guess it's just so kids can buy the blaster rifles. And I don't even recall seeing any merchandising in the stores for this, but I can see them selling the helmets the elves wore, and I don't know. But anytime I see a kid lead player and he dresses up in a suit and sunglasses, just like, oh, this is just Richie Rich. It seemed like one of those movies you see in the store that's a knockoff of another movie that's a knockoff of another movie. It just seems like everything was half-assed. Everything wasn't thought through. Apparently it wasn't based on the book at all. That's what the reviewers that have read the book said. They were like, why did they even make this and say it was Artemis Fowl, because that has nothing to do with the book. But let's see. I don't have a good rating system because every movie I rate is different. On this one, I'm going to use a scale of 1 to 100, and I'm going to rate it like in the 10 to 15 range, because there's just nothing about this movie that stood out. If you want noise while you're vacuuming, maybe. But like I said, the special effects, I watched it because I thought it would be a fun movie to watch visually, and it wasn't. It just wasn't. I thought it'd be a fun movie to watch because I heard it was the worst movie ever, and I wanted to see if it really was the worst movie ever, and maybe it was. And I watched it because I thought, oh, a good fantasy flick. I'm into fantasy stuff. I watch a lot of horror movies, but I also watch a lot of I grew up with Lord of the Rings and stuff. But no, the fantasy in this was just like, boom, here it is, and this is it, and this is the way it's been for thousands of years, and okay, that part of the expedition is done. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend wasting your time on this movie. Even if you got little kids, I don't think there's anything little kids would find redeeming in this movie. I don't know. So yeah, I'm going to give it a bad review. It's thumbs down. It's 1 star out of 5. It's 10 points out of 100. There's just nothing really about this movie you'd want to watch it for. If you're a fan of Artemis Fowl, the books, I'm told, really stay away from this movie because it's nothing to do with the books. If they make more of these, I just hope they think out things better, and they at least, it's almost like they had 10 different writers each writing a scene without knowing what the other writers were writing in their scenes. That's the best way to describe this movie, and that's what I'm going with. Parts of the movie were written by people who didn't know what was going on in other parts of the movie. So anyway, that's it. I'm Star Thinker. Look for Randy Pischel on Amazon. Interesting things are happening with my book now that some of the other competing books are gone. So that's fun, and I'm having fun with it. And I'm gonna wrap up this review because I'm rambling now. So anyway, take care. And this is my review of Artemis Fowl.